Hello there everyone, welcome to the channel if you're new, welcome back if you aren't. I'm EDJ, and we are covering the post-Caesar Civil Wars. Last time we saw the acts of the, Second Triumvirate, very brutal, very bloody, very... Yeah, it's hard to take the side of that, but, yeah, it's just overall an era of complete chaos. And we're going to be seeing the specific battles now that they've established their power base at Rome. Now we're going to see the Caesarians versus the, Pompeians once again. So if you want to watch the original video, the link is always down in the description down below. Without any further ado, let's just get into it. Let's watch the Battle of Xanthos and Rhodes.
In our previous episode, we talked about the Second Triumvirate and how Octavian, Antony, and Lepidus took over Rome, enacting bloody proscriptions and solidifying their power. However, Brutus and Cassius had not been idle. They too had effectively revived the Pompeian faction under their leadership as the Liberators and were amassing their forces for war. In this episode, we shall see how they mobilized almost the entirety of the East and prepared for their confrontation with the Triumvirs. These grand figures of Roman history left a well. Brutus had seized Macedonia and the legions located there from Antony's brother Gaius in 43 BC. Worried that his men would just as easily defect back to Antony's side, Brutus had sailed across the Aegean to Asia Minor, hoping that the distance would prevent any pro-Antony rumors from reaching them. From here, he consolidated his position, rallying more men to his cause, particularly refugees fleeing the Triumvirate's proscriptions in Rome. Combined with the army previously under Gaius's command, he had 8 legions. Gaius Antonius proved to be a constant problem though, attempting to instigate a number of mutinies among Brutus's ranks. After the formation of the Second Triumvirate, it was decided that Gaius was now too dangerous to be left alive, and he was executed at the start of 42 BC. Around this same time, Brutus, nervous of a potential revolt in Macedonia, crossed back into Europe to handle any potential disasters. He also undertook a minor expedition in Thrace, winning the Thracian king Rescupolis to the Pompeian cause. After reaffirming his control of Macedonia, he once again pulled back to Asia Minor. Meanwhile in Syria, Cassius, following the death of Dolabella, had planned to march on Egypt. Out of the 12 legions that Cassius had procured from the governors of the East, 4 had been sent by Cleopatra to assist Dolabella before being intercepted en route. It was apparent then that Cleopatra intended to side with the Triumvirs, and Cassius aimed to quash this possibility early. As he began his march on Cleopatra, however, word reached him of the formation of the Second Triumvirate, and that they had already begun moving forces into Greece, sailing 8 legions across the Adriatic. Immediately, Cassius abandoned his plan, marching to Asia Minor with all speed to combine with Brutus, requesting aid from Eastern client kings and even the Parthians as he marched.
Wow.
The two men met in Smyrna in Anatolia around late January 42 BC. Initially, Brutus suggested that they take their entire force of 20 legions immediately to Macedonia to confront the Triumvirs. He reasoned that if they attacked now, they would be able to crush the 8 legions and prevent any more from landing in Macedonia. Cassius, on the other hand, disagreed. The Triumvirs had their hands full in Rome, and would also be nervous of Sextus Pompey amassing forces in Sicily. Moreover, the Caesarians had a number of allies in the area, namely the Rhodians and Lycians, with strong navies that could effectively pin Cassius.
Wait, is Sextus officially aligned with Rhodes and Cassius? I'm not sure if I missed that. But it seems like at least I'm judging by the background color, he seems to be a force on his own, but I don't know why he wouldn't want to join with these guys, the killers of Caesar, right? And then, I don't know, I just see a potential great alliance right there with the 3 of them,
Cassius and Brutus in Greece if they were not careful. Cassius thus suggested that their focus should be to eliminate these allies. In doing so, they could flip the tables, forcing the Triumvirs to land a large force in Greece without an adequate naval supply line to support them. Cassius was the more experienced and talented general. He had fought in Crassus's Parthian campaign and had distinguished himself in the aftermath. As such, the two men decided to follow Cassius's strategy. Brutus would handle the Lycians and Cassius the Rhodians. Cassius made for Myndus and began amassing a fleet of 80 ships to sail for Rhodes. He had been partly raised and educated on the island and was well known in the city. Upon hearing of his approach, the Rhodians sent peace delegations. Rhodes was technically an ally of the Roman Republic. The Rhodians had a peace treaty with Rome and had promised to assist the Senate in times of war. With the Senate now effectively controlled by the Triumvirate, the Rhodians could not side against them. Cassius rejected these arguments. He claimed the Senate was run by dictators, that he and Brutus were now the true embodiment of the Republic, and that the Rhodians thus owed their allegiance to them. Still, the Rhodians refused Cassius and began preparing their fleet for war. In a last-ditch effort to make peace, they sent Archelaus, Cassius's old teacher, to negotiate. Tearfully, Archelaus begged Cassius to spare the city. Cassius again refused. He pointed out that the Senate had previously ordered all people east of the Adriatic should assist himself and Brutus. This was true. However, if the Rhodians abided by that decree and assisted Cassius and Brutus, they would simultaneously be breaking their peace treaty by going to war with the Roman Senate.
Yo, I'm starting to feel bad for the Rhodians, man. Like, they are caught between a rock and a hard place, and it's like, yeah, they're gonna get wrecked either way, right? So at this point, you just have to fight. But man, that's like, kind of feel bad for them. They're kind of dragged into something they probably don't want to be dragged into, right?
After many days of debating, they finally came to a conclusion. Sailing with 33 of their best ships, they sailed to Myndus to fight Cassius's navy. Cassius reluctantly sailed out of port to meet them. The Rhodians were renowned as some of the best sailors of the ancient world, and their ships were light and quick. The fighting was hard, but Cassius's larger navy was eventually able to surround the Rhodian fleet. Without room to maneuver, the lighter Rhodian ships lost their advantage, and the heavy Roman ships were able to close in. 3 Rhodian ships were captured, 2 sunk, and many badly damaged, before the Rhodians withdrew from the battle. Cassius quickly made any necessary repairs to his fleet before pushing his advantage and landing a force on the island. The Rhodian navy attempted to sally out of its port, but was again quickly crushed. Cassius now had Rhodes besieged from both land and sea. Rather than suffer the horrors of a prolonged siege, a faction within the city opened the gates to Cassius. 50 leading Rhodians were executed, and their vast treasury was seized, but the city was spared, Cassius forbidding his men from violence or looting. Brutus, meanwhile, led his 8 legions against the important city of Xanthos.
It is cooler to see, you know, Cassius, and I guess we're gonna see Brutus's, I guess, you know, tactical and strategic abilities, because, you know, usually I know that obviously, you know, they were in the Senate, they participated in the death of Caesar, and then, you know, usually kind of fast forward to where they both meet their ends, but I guess the in-between I don't really know much about, so I wasn't aware that Cassius had any, I wasn't aware of Cassius's, I guess, talent or skills, so this is very illuminating to see these, we're going to be seeing these guys and what they're capable of, which is a new side that I did, like I said, it was previously unknown to me, but very interesting.
In Lycia. The Xanthians had prepared themselves well, creating a trench and embankment around the city. However, many of the men under Brutus's command had served under Caesar and had experience of siegecraft. Working day and night under the protection of movable defenses, the legions were able to completely besiege the city in a matter of days. Battering rams were swiftly brought up to attack the walls and gates. The defenses were strong though, and Brutus's men, having only managed to inflict minor damage on the defenses, abandoned their siege engines. That night, the Xanthians sallied out to burn the rams. Suddenly, Brutus's men fell upon them in the darkness. The Xanthians had been lured into a trap. Desperately, they tried to retreat into the city.
That was smart. It reminds me of that old siege, I forgot which video, but where they built these ramparts and then, you know, they burned them down. But yeah, it seems like Brutus had learned from that.
But finding the gate had been closed, they were trapped outside, and many were killed in front of the gates. The next day, the Xanthians again sallied out to burn the rams, and the Romans again attacked. This time, the Xanthians kept their gate open, allowing their men to retreat back into the city, but this also resulted in about 2,000 Romans also getting through. The Xanthians suddenly dropped their portcullis, trapping the Romans inside. They, too, had lured the Romans into a trap. Desperately, the 2,000
Dang! Eye for an eye. Wow, that's smart.
legionaries trapped inside fought their way to the Forum under constant missile fire, taking refuge in the Temple of Sarpedon. At the same time, their colleagues on the outside were determined to break in and rescue them, attempting to use grappling hooks to scale the walls, some using crags in the wall to climb their way up. A small group was able to scale the walls and opened a small side gate, allowing more legionaries inside. They fought their way to the portcullis, and with men hacking at it from the inside and outside, were finally able to break it down, allowing Brutus's force to pour into the city. The city was lost, and according to Appian, many of the citizens killed themselves, with Brutus only taking 150 men captive.
Dang.
Following this siege,
That's brutal.
other cities in Lycia, such as Patara and Myra, quickly surrendered to Brutus. Soon, all of Lycia was pledged to him militarily and paid heavy tributes to him. In a few months, Brutus and Cassius between them had thus neutered two powerful naval allies of the Triumvirs, as well as massively increasing their finances, ensuring that they would be able to keep their legions loyal when the time came to confront the Triumvirs in Greece.
Wow. Really good opening for them too. Wow, they're making moves as well.
Cassius and Brutus, hearing that Cleopatra was also sending a fleet to the Peloponnese, sent 80 ships of their fleet under Mercus to keep an eye out for her arrival. Fortunately for the liberators though, a storm had devastated Cleopatra's fleet, forcing her to return to Egypt. Not wanting to keep such a large fleet idle, Mercus instead sailed to Brundisium to blockade the port and prevent the Triumvirs from sending more men across the Adriatic. Antony, in command of the forces in the area, attempted to break the blockade with his own ships, but did not have the numbers and was forced to send for Octavian to assist him. Octavian was currently engaged in a campaign against Sextus Pompey. The son of Pompey the Great had taken advantage of the chaos caused by the assassination of Caesar, its aftermath, and the conflict between the Senate and Antony to rebuild his position in Sicily. Gathering men from across the Mediterranean, he had gradually been building his force. This force grew larger still during the proscriptions of the Triumvirate, which had forced many influential men to take refuge with him. Shortly after the formation of the Triumvirate, he had used this force to besiege the governor of Sicily, and with the help of some senators who had fled to him, forced him to surrender the province. The Triumvirs had only just begun treating him as a serious threat, Octavian sending his top general at the time, Salvidienus, to handle the matter. However, Sextus had dealt Salvidienus a minor but important victory in the Straits of Messina. Octavian had taken up the campaign himself, but upon receiving Antony's summons, immediately sailed to Brundisium, leaving Sicily and Sextus alone for the time being. Upon Octavian's arrival, Mercus retreated, not wanting to be trapped between the forces of Antony and Octavian. Instead, he planned to harass any ships attempting to cross the Adriatic. The Triumvirs were far more audacious than Mercus assumed, however, and with favourable winds, they made a number of quick and risky crossings without military ships so as not to draw too much attention. Soon, Antony and Octavian had managed to move 11 legions across the Adriatic, leaving Lepidus in Rome to control the city. Mercus was furious, but nevertheless held his position. determined to at the very least prevent any supplies or munitions from reaching the triumvirs. Ahenobarbus, son of the same man who had fought against Caesar, was sent with a further 50 ships to support him, giving him a total of 130. Octavian and Antony quickly sent the 8 legions who had landed in Greece earlier in the year towards Thrace under the command of Decatus and Norbanus to hold the Copilian and Sapaean passes, 2 important routes into Greece for any force crossing from Asia Minor. Meanwhile, Brutus and Cassius crossed the Aegean into Greece, landing in Sestus in August 42 BC. Thrace, at the time, was ruled by 2 brothers, Rhascupolis and Rhascus. Brutus had previously won Rhascupolis to his side, and the Thracian king now went with 3,000 cavalry to reinforce the liberators, while his brother Rhascus sided with the triumvirs, leading 3,000 cavalry to Decatus and Norbanus. The board was now set. Appian claims that Antony and Octavian had roughly 100,000 men, consisting of 19 legions, the 11 recently transported from Italy and the 8 holding the Thracian passes, as well as 13,000 cavalry. Cassius and Brutus also had approximately 100,000, consisting of 19 legions, some of which were under...
Dang, okay, they're pretty evenly matched, but I'm just amazed they can keep raising so many people, right? Then again, that is kind of one of Rome's, like, most notorious abilities, their ability to just regenerate armies, so, especially now with this expanded, obviously, pre-Empire Rome is just... wow. And honestly, the Pompeian side just can keep coming back in some way or another. Is kind of amazing in its own way.
The strength, 20,000 allied cavalry and 4,000 horse archers from the Parthians, Medes and Arabs. Some modern historians, however, have questioned whether such large armies could realistically be maintained logistically, and have suggested numbers closer to 60,000 on both sides. Whatever the true number, it is agreed that the triumvirs had a slight infantry advantage and the liberators a slight edge in the number of cavalry. Even if the more modest number of 60,000 on each side is accepted, both armies would still be colossal, larger than even the armies fielded by Caesar and Pompey at Pharsalus. In many ways, it was a case of history repeating itself. The Caesarians, this time under Antony and Octavian, had landed a large army in Greece, but had a...
Yeah, I was gonna say, this is when, like, Caesar landed in Greece to confront Pompey. He was also blocked as well. Was it? No, it was by Bibulus at first, but point is, yeah, and if Greece is the final setting point, yeah, it's just, history loves repeating itself, but yeah, it's just completely almost playing out exactly the same way.
Precarious supply route, with their enemies controlling the sea behind them. The Pompeians, under Cassius and Brutus, also had a large army with a secure supply line, and they could focus on trying to force a situation where they could starve their opponents into submission. In our next episode, we will talk about the pivotal Battle of Philippi, so make sure you are subscribed and have pressed the bell button to see it. Please consider...
So I think he's done for now, and I will say, guys, that was another great, that was more of a setting up kind of video, but you did see Brutus and Cassius are obviously a threat. You know, they invaded the 2 islands, severely giving them a naval edge, and yeah, overall, good first moves. So now it's like these massive armies are about to collide. And man, this is just interesting. I want to jump to the next one, so I'm just going to move forward. I'll see you guys in the next video. Bye, everyone.